Today, we're jumping into a pretty wild and honestly a kind of unsettling topic. We're talking about the new rules of power and how they're quietly reshaping what we can and can't say. We're going to see how governments, big tech, and corporations are all creating this brand new, really complex world for free speech, and it all kicks off with one single, very controversial joke.
So it all started right here, like it so often does, in a late-night monologue. It's September 15th, 2025, and Jimmy Kimmel makes this joke about the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. And as you can probably guess, the comment immediately set off a political bomb. And the fallout? It was incredibly fast and incredibly harsh. Just a few hours after that show aired, ABC, which is owned by Disney, pulled Jimmy Kimmel Live right off the schedule. Indefinitely. I mean, think about that. A huge star, a flagship show, just gone. Vanished from the airwaves just like that.
So you have to ask, what really happened here? Was this just a company trying to dodge a PR nightmare and protect its bottom line? Or was there something else going on behind the scenes? And that is the absolute core question, because the story behind why they pulled the show reveals this powerful and often totally invisible kind of government pressure.
This brings us to a really important idea, a tactic that's called jawboning. It sounds a little weird, but it's a subtle and, frankly, an incredibly effective way for the government to get exactly what it wants without ever having to pass a law.
Okay, so check this out. Before ABC even made the decision to pull Kimmel's show, the chairman of the FCC, Brendan Carr, went on a podcast and said this, word for word. Now, this wasn't a law, it wasn't some formal ruling, it was a public warning. A threat, really, just barely hidden, and it was aimed squarely at companies like ABC and its parent Disney.
And that, right there, is the textbook definition of jawboning. It's when a government official uses the threat of their power, the jawbone, right, to lean on a private company and get them to do something the government wants, but probably couldn't legally make them do. And here's where that pressure gets very, very real. It's all about the gap between what the FCC can actually do legally and what it hints it could do. So on the left, you've got the FCC's official, pretty limited authority, but on the right, whoa, those are the really big sticks they're waving around. The threat isn't just a fine for indecency. The implied threat is losing your broadcast licenses entirely or having a multi-billion-dollar business deal get blocked. For a company the size of Disney, that is a risk you just can't afford to take.
But here's the thing. The whole Kimmel situation, it wasn't just a one-off event. It was actually just one piece of a much bigger, much more systematic strategy. We're talking about a campaign using the entire power of the federal government to push a specific ideological point of view.
18. What's that number? Well, according to research from FIRE, that's the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, that's how many executive orders affecting free speech were issued in just the first 80 days of the administration. This wasn't just a random collection of policies, it was a deliberate, coordinated campaign from the very top.
And you just have to look at the scope of this thing. It was huge. It wasn't only about the media. The pressure was being applied literally everywhere. You've got law firms getting grilled about the clients they represent, universities being pushed on their diversity policies, all the way down to what's being taught in local schools and what's being shown in our national museums.
And to make all this happen, the entire federal bureaucracy was put to work. We are talking about over 20 different agencies, the FBI, the Department of Education, you name it, all using their power to investigate, to pull funding, to force people to fall in line. One analyst called it a whole-of-government and whole-of-society campaign to control what people say and think.
Okay, so while the U.S. was busy building out this model of political pressure, a totally different model of control has been taking shape, and fast, on the other side of the planet. And this one isn't built on political threats. It's built on technology and, you guessed it, data.
Yeah, this image really captures that shift. We're moving from the politics of coercion to the technology of control. In this new model, power isn't about threatening a company with regulations. It's about collecting and crunching massive amounts of data on every single person in the country.
The National Endowment for Democracy has a name for this: data-centric authoritarianism. It's a system that's really being perfected by China, and it uses the absolute latest in AI and tech to build these incredibly sophisticated, society-wide systems of control and repression.
And this system works along four main pathways. First up, AI surveillance. We're talking about so-called city brains that can track entire cities to stop protests before they can even begin. Second, neuroattack.
Stuff like brain-computer interfaces that might one day be able to figure out what you're thinking, and maybe even influence it. Third, quantum computing. This is a potential game changer that could make all of our current encryption useless, meaning no digital message would be private. And last, digital currencies. A digital dollar or yuan run by the state would mean the government could see and control every single purchase you make, in real time.
So, picture this. You have these two giant forces emerging. This political pressure model in some places and this high-tech control model in others. And who is stuck right in the middle of it all? Global corporations. They are caught in this absolutely impossible squeeze from every direction.
I mean, just look at these real-world examples. In Belarus, a company faced the choice. Do you stay and try to protect your workers' rights on the ground? Or do you leave so you're not funding a brutal regime? Or in Myanmar, the choice was even worse. Hand over all your customer data to the military, which could get activists killed, or refuse and put your own employees' lives at risk. I mean, these aren't just tough calls, they're impossible. There's no good answer.
And this brings us right back to where we started with Jimmy Kimmel. Because whether it's a dictator in Myanmar demanding data or an FCC chairman in the US making a suggestion, the end result for a company is the same. As this analyst from PhilStockWorld put it so bluntly, managing political risk isn't some side issue anymore. It's now a core part of your duty to your shareholders.
The ultimate result of all this pressure, from governments, from tech, from the market itself, is what's called a chilling effect. And it's so powerful because it's not about passing laws that ban speech. It's about companies and the people who work for them becoming so afraid of the risk that they just start censoring themselves. They don't speak up, not because anyone's forcing them to be silent, but because they're terrified of what might happen if they don't.
And that really is the fundamental problem we're all facing now. The threats to free speech don't just come from one obvious place anymore. They're coming from governments using these veiled threats, from technology that allows for total surveillance, and from market forces that punish anyone who steps out of line. And it all leaves us with one final and really important question. When the state, technology, and the market all start pushing in the same direction to control speech, who's left to stand up and protect it?